Discovered. The amazing journey of a maid who never gave up and transformed lives in 10 years. Maria dashed through the busy streets of New York City, her heart racing with the rhythm of the city. Each step echoed her daily battle against the weight of the world. A Guatemalan immigrant, she carried not just the dust of opulent penthouses, but the dreams of a better life for her ailing mother, confined to a cramped apartment in the Bronx. Cleaning the lavish homes of the wealthy felt like a cruel reminder of everything she lacked. Day after day, the disparity cut deeper, a constant pang of resentment lodged in her chest. In the midst of her hurried pace, a moment of serendipity turned her world upside down. It was on the rooftop of one of those very buildings that she met Mrs. Anderson, an elderly artist with an eye for the extraordinary. At first, Maria felt invisible in her presence, just another face in a sea of hired help. But then, Mrs. Anderson's sharp gaze lingered on her, recognizing the flicker of creativity behind Maria's weary eyes. "You have something special within you," she had said, igniting a spark long buried beneath layers of grime and exhaustion. The thought of exchanging cleaning utensils for paintbrushes sent Maria's mind racing. As she sandwiched more hours into her day, late-night painting sessions became her only escape. Each stroke of her brush was a rebellion against the suffocating life she lived. Yet, the glittering art world felt like an unreachable star, taunting her with its exclusivity, reminding her of her status, skin color, and immigrant label. Maria wrestled with these judgments, her ambition colliding with soul-crushing doubt. She was a maid, not an artist, and that was how the world saw her. The tension escalated when she learned that her mother's health was fading. Guilt clawed at her, threatening to unravel her newfound passion. How could she chase dreams when her family depended on her? The thought of abandoning her mother left a bitter taste in her mouth. Just as her hands were beginning to create magic on canvas, her heart was being pulled back to the reality of caregiving. Every morning she woke up, torn between the desire to break free and the loyalty that bound her. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. The critical moment arrived. Maria's paintings gained unexpected attention online, and an upcoming exhibit threatened to lift her out of anonymity. Anxiety coursed through her veins as she weighed the imminent leap. Leave her job, chase her dreams, and risk everything. Or stay behind, crippled by fear and obligations. Each moment felt like the calm before a storm, the brush poised above the canvas, a heart thudding in rhythm with her racing thoughts. Just as she braced for the tidal surge toward opportunity, a devastating revelation about her mother's past struck her like lightning. The weight of expectation collided painfully with the vulnerability of love. Could she choose her art without sacrificing her mother? As the exhibit loomed ever closer, the emotional chasm widened. Maria was caught in an agonizing dilemma. Should she follow the path to her dreams, or stay grounded in a life fraught with love and responsibility? The question loomed heavy, and with each ticking second, the stakes only grew higher. Would this be the moment that changed everything, or would she remain ensnared by duty, struggling just to survive? Maria stared at the empty canvas stretched out before her, the tantalizing image of colors swirling in her mind, far more vivid than the grim reality she faced. The impending exhibit loomed over her like a shadow, taunting her with the tantalizing possibility of success, yet making her heart ache for what she might leave behind. The revelation about her mother's past echoed through her thoughts, a continuous loop of confusion and anger. Her mother, the woman who had dedicated her life to Maria, had carried secrets so heavy that they threatened to crush their fragile bonds. How had she never known? It clawed at Maria, like a wound never allowed to heal. The instinctual desire to protect her mother fought against her yearning to break free. Could she unveil the truth, or was ignorance easier? Juggling work, care for her mother, and her burgeoning artistic aspirations became an exercise in acute stress management. She cleaned under the weight of her decision, each dust particle settling like her thoughts, scattered and disordered. Maria worked harder than ever, motivated by an internal fire, driven to prove herself aware of her potential even in the face of hopelessness. Yet every night came with its own battles. She would sit in front of the canvas, brush in hand, staring at the blank surface. The silent pressure became unbearable, with each tick of the clock a reminder of her diminishing time. That was the true enemy, the time limiting her ambition. Painting became a struggle as she fought to extract vibrant hues amidst feelings of guilt and anger. In moments of clarity, thoughts of Mrs. Anderson became soothing. Her encouragement felt like an iron anchor in the storm. You have something special within you. If only she could lasso that latent promise again. If only she could channel everything swirling inside, her fears, hopes, resentments, into her art. Maria had no time for failing. Not when she could still reach for her dreams, balancing on knives' edges to save both her mother and herself. One evening, emboldened by a fleeting moment of clarity after a long day of work, Maria took a bold step. She called Mrs. Anderson. The old woman's voice, warm and inviting, echoed like an old friend through the phone line. "I have something to show you," Maria said, the words spilling out as if they had been waiting to escape. And to her surprise, Mrs. Anderson agreed to meet. Was it time to reveal her art? Could the anxiety transform into opportunity? But her heart raced as she put down the phone. What if Mrs. Anderson didn't see the talent she hoped existed within her? The fear that gripped her throat was visceral. All those years of quiet perseverance could amount to nothing. In her dream, she envisioned the gallery's white walls adorning her canvases, a life fully realized. The thought scared her and excited her in equal measure, yet she understood that stepping into that space was a decision far greater than she had anticipated. Was she ready to face the truth of her own artistry? As the days edged closer to the exhibit and her meeting with Mrs. Anderson, Maria argued with herself. Each internal confrontation prompted a lingering question. How much was she willing to sacrifice for something she barely believed she could achieve? The stakes were climbing, and with them her mental strain. As the lift doors closed behind her at the end of another long day, her heart pounded anew, stealing her resolve. The moment of truth lurked just ahead, waiting for her. With the world around her bustling, Maria sensed a striking shift. Would she embrace her emerging identity, or would she retreat into the shadows forever? The choice would be laid bare soon, as she prepared to confront not just her art but herself. The tension unfurled like a tightly wound coil, waiting for release. Would her passion prevail, or would she falter under the weight of expectation? As she turned towards home, that familiar blend of dread and hope clung to her, reminding her of the uncharted journey ahead. The next chapter in her life was about to unfold, but would she have the courage to write it? As the soft glow of dawn crept through her bedroom window, Maria lay awake, her thoughts a chaotic swirl of excitement and anxiety. Today was the day she would show her art to Mrs. Anderson, a pivotal moment she had prepared for in hushed silence. The shadows of doubt still loomed large over her, but she felt a spark of determination flicker in the depths of her heart, urging her to rise. After a quick shower, she stood in front of the mirror, analyzing the woman staring back at her. Paler than usual but with an earnest kind of fire igniting her hazel eyes, Maria brushed her fingers against her cheeks, as if daring herself to embrace the place where fear mingled with anticipation. With a decisive nod, she picked up her brush, the familiar weight feeling both foreign and comforting in her hand. Stepping into her studio, the scent of oil paint and turpentine wrapped around her like an old friend. The empty canvas towered over her, yet today it held promise rather than petrifying blankness. She began to paint, strokes flowing at first tentatively, then with surprising confidence. Each flick, each shade carried a part of her, her worries over her mother, the weight of secrets unspoken, and the flicker of potential that had long been dimmed. Time slipped away, unnoticed and unheeded, as she lost herself in the colors. With every stroke, the scarlet of her anger and the blues of her despair merged into vibrant splashes that cried out for recognition, for release. Hours passed, and the morning light revealed a canvassed reflection of her inner tumult. The painting stood incomplete, yet it whispered truths she had buried too deep. It was more than just a reflection of her thoughts. It was a portal into her essence. Doubt began to creep in again, a familiar specter lingering at the edge of her mind. What if Mrs. Anderson didn't see the potential she felt pulsing through the canvas? What if the art failed to resonate? But she reminded herself that she had faced worse, losing pieces of herself to silence and fear. This was about acknowledgement, not just from the world around her, but from within. With the clock ticking closer to her meeting, she took a deep breath, steadied by the figure of her mother in the corner of her mind, always believing, always hopeful, in the face of her own shadows. It was a testament to the enduring love and belief that had guided Maria through her darkest days. Arriving at Mrs. Anderson's quaint studio felt like stepping into an intimate embrace. Art adorned the walls, each piece telling its unique story. Maria's heart raced as she faced the polished woodwork table strewn with brushes and paint tubes, a welcoming contrast to her own chaotic workspace. Mrs. Anderson sensed her nerves immediately. "Maria, my dear, you look radiant. Tell me, what have you been working on?" Her encouraging tone melted Maria's apprehensions as she unveiled her creation, each inch revealing slices of vulnerability she hadn't dared expose. The moment of truth loomed. The weight of judgment sat heavy in the air. Maria steadied her breathing, focusing on the strokes, the colors that spoke her truth. As Mrs. Anderson studied the painting, Maria could feel her own vulnerability laid bare, an offering on an altar of passion. "I see you poured yourself into this piece," Mrs. Anderson finally said, her voice steady yet brimming with warmth. "There's a rawness here that's compelling. It tells a story, your story, of conflict, but also of hope." Hope. The word carried an unexpected ripple of strength through Maria, nudging her forward from the edge of fear. Through this, perhaps she would finally confront the looming shadows of not just her art, but of her life. Yet, as they discussed her painting, a flicker of unease surfaced within her. What if Mrs. Anderson's support came with the expectation of more? The pressure to perform, to deliver something beyond what was real, stirred a familiar anxiousness deep inside her. Would she muster the courage to resist the lure of external validation? Or would she chase a dream that might slip through her fingers like paint on her brush? As she began to articulate her thoughts, the answer hung tantalizingly close, urging her to seize the moment. Would she remain true to her own voice? She could feel her heart expanding, ready to embrace not just the applaud of an audience, but the truth of who she could become. The path ahead thickened with possibilities, leaving her teetering on the brink of revelation. Would this moment mark the beginning of a deeper journey in her art and beyond? Or would the weight of expectation crush her burgeoning resolve? The tension swelled, challenging her to make a choice that could transform everything, both her art and her identity. Maria's thoughts raced like a fevered brush on canvas as she gauged Mrs. Anderson's reaction. There was an intensity in her mentor's gaze that both invigorated and terrified her. Hope, the word hung in the air long after it was spoken, a buoy amidst waves of uncertainty, yet it also anchored her to expectations she wasn't sure she could meet. "Tell me more about your process," Mrs. Anderson prompted gently, yet the words seemed to carry the weight of an impending evaluation. Maria hesitated, contemplating how to articulate the cacophony of emotions swirling within her as she pieced together hues and shadows. "What I feel when I paint," she started, her voice trembling slightly. "It feels like an unraveling. Every stroke reveals something I hadn't faced before." "Revealing something hidden is where true art begins," Mrs. Anderson interjected, giving a concurring nod. "Art isn't simply about aesthetics. It's about the dialogue between the artist and their own truths. You're navigating the complexities of your emotions, your identity. That's powerful. The familiar specter of doubt reared its head again. Maria felt a surge of fear. Was she exposing herself too much? What if the truth she confronted were not just her own, but also ones that challenged the expectations placed upon her? The idea gripped her, sending a shudder down her spine. "You're right, but," she faltered, "I fear that what I reveal isn't what the world wants to see." This confession, born of vulnerability, felt like a release and a risk. Would Mrs. Anderson understand the weight of societal pressures that haunted her art? "Art is subjective, Maria," Mrs. Anderson replied, and her voice was steady, imbued with an authority that made Maria's heart flutter with both anxiety and trust. "Don't confine yourself to what others may expect. This is your journey, your voice. Embrace it fully regardless of how it resonates with others." Just as confidence began to ripple through her, that insidious worry returned. The pressure of expectation loomed like a storm cloud. What if embracing her true voice led to rejection, or worse, apathy? Gathering her resolve, she spoke with a newfound steadiness. "I want to be true to myself. I want my art to resonate deeply, even if that means it won't always be accepted or understood." Mrs. Anderson's expression softened, shadows of admiration dancing in her eyes. That is the essence of an artist, the ability to confront fear and to honor what's raw and authentic within. "I see remarkable potential, but you must nurture it with a sense of purpose, not with the desire for validation." As they continued their discussion, the conversation evolved. Mrs. Anderson began introducing concepts of technique and form, but Maria found herself lost in the intricacies of the dialogue. The pressure felt heavy, and each suggestion, while well-meaning, retraced the edges of her anxiety. Could she truly balance the need for self-expression while developing skills that were equally demanding? The contrast of her desire to create and the technical requirement felt like an intricate dance she was unprepared for. She wrestled internally with each lesson, feeling the tension of ambition clashing with her ingrained fears. After what felt like hours, Maria left Mrs. Anderson's studio with not just a sense of achievement, but also a lingering unease. Was she ready to commit to this artistic path that felt so intertwined with her soul, yet so daunting? As she stepped into the soft evening glow, clutching her portfolio, an unsettling realization struck her. This was only the beginning. Every decision from here on out would demand the essence of her courage. Would she allow her fears to handicap her growth? Or would she fight to channel those same fears into her work? The next canvas awaited her stroke, a part of her yearning for the plunge, yet another part hesitated, questioning how much of herself she was prepared to lay bare. Could she dare to turn fear into strength? The streetlights flickered to life around her, illuminating her path forward. Each step echoed a resounding fate, a chance to embrace her art, or the possibility of fading into anonymity. Maria paused at the threshold of her studio, heart pounding with anticipation and dread. Would she confront her greatest adversary, her own self-doubt, or slip back into the comfort of silence? The answer beckoned, tantalizingly close. But as shadows settled around her, one question resonated louder than the rest. How far was she willing to go to discover her true voice amidst the clamor of expectations? The moment she stepped inside her studio, the air thick with the lingering scent of paint and canvas, Maria felt both invigorated and constricted. The walls, adorned with half-finished pieces and sketches, stood as silent witnesses to her inner turbulence. Each brushstroke she had previously laid out felt like at once a victory and an indictment of where she still stood. Tension simmered within her, dancing between ambition and apprehension. As she shuffled her art supplies, she stumbled upon a canvas she had began weeks ago, bright colors struggling to define a hesitant figure. The image felt foreign to her, a weak representation of her evolving identity. Disappointment washed over her. Was this the best she could do? Shaking off the doubt, she recalled Mrs. Anderson's words, "Embrace your journey." A flicker of resolve ignited inside her. She placed the canvas on the easel and studied it. It was time to confront this part of herself. She dipped the brush into the paint, her hand steadying despite the chaos that surrounded her thoughts. "Let it all out," she murmured to herself. The initial strokes were tentative, a reflection of her hesitance. The colors blended into one another, depicting a landscape of confusion, but also a promise of potential. With every sweep, the self-imposed confines of expectation began to dissolve. What emerged was not merely a landscape, but a visceral expression of her struggle, a tapestry woven from her fears. As she painted, memories cascaded, the essence of her childhood sculpted by the voices that had shaped her conception of art, her mother's dream of what a real artist should encapsulate, her high school peers' critical gazes that favored conventional beauty. Those thoughts clawed at her, yet she forced herself to remember Mrs. Anderson's lesson. Art is personal, a reflection of one's internal dialogue above all else. In that moment of creation, fear morphed into fire. Her brush danced anxiously across the canvas, spilling the vibrant hues that represented both despair and hope. Alone in her studio, engulfed in the rhythm of her strokes, she began to unearth hidden depths to her talents, a burgeoning awareness of her capability to channel emotion through art, translating that inner turmoil into something externally tangible. Yet amidst this breakthrough, a voice slithered back into her psyche. What if it's not enough? The taunting skepticism was overwhelming. Her heart raced with trepidation as her vision blurred slightly. Could she truly create something that mattered? Taking a deep breath, Maria paused. It was essential to dismantle the shackles of comparison. She reached for a clean brush and cleared a section of the canvas. With each application of color, she consciously chose to paint over the parts that hadn't resonated with her. It was liberating and terrifying, a choice to embrace imperfection and redefine what success in her art meant. The art world, with its rigid expectations and critiques, loomed over her like a distant storm. But this moment was hers. This canvas could be a metaphor for her growth, not just as a painter, but as the indomitable individual she aspired to be. With renewed determination, Maria delved deeper, pouring out fragments of herself, laying them one by one on the canvas. She was becoming. In the back of her mind, a question unfurled. Would this journey help her find clarity, or would it lead her further into obscurity? As twilight descended, the studio bathed in a serene glow. Maria stepped back, breath heavy with anticipation and uncertainty. The canvas now stood with pockets of vibrancy, whispers of her struggle echoing through the layers of paint. She felt as if the work was coming to life, reflecting the tumultuous path of creativity and self-discovery. But just as she relished this moment, her phone buzzed with a message that snapped her heart into a harder beat. "We need to talk. There's something you've got to see." The words sent a jolt of unease through her. What awaited her outside this realm she was slowly learning to embrace? Would she collapse back into a world that demanded conformity? Or would the conversation about to unfold serve as another crucible for her art and identity? The turning point loomed, promising both uncertainty and possibility. Maria stood still as the message pulsed a question mark into her consciousness. As she crawled out of the artistic reverie that had enveloped her, the brightness of her creative world dimmed under the weight of potential conflict. Curiosity mingled with dread. Her heart thumped loudly as she weighed her options. Part of her wanted to ignore the message, to luxuriate in the sanctuary of her studio, where colors mingled freely, where emotions could be bared on canvas without judgment. But another voice urged her to dare, to confront whatever awaited her outside. The evening sun cast long shadows across her studio as she took a moment to study her nearly completed canvas. It gleamed with the layered stories of her growth, echoing challenges overcome and fears faced. It felt alive, but could she carry that current of vibrancy with her into the outside world? Determined to balance her internal transformation with external realities, she sighed and reached for her coat, enveloping herself in a protective barrier as she stepped out into the unknown. A brisk wind met her as she walked to the cafe where the conversation awaited. It felt like a physical manifestation of her anxiety, cold and biting, but electric enough to invigorate her, to remind her that she was alive, and that each step was a choice she was making. Every footfall resonated with a mundane routine, yet within her mind, A dialogue erupted. What had she accomplished? Could she continue forging her own artistic path despite the past's heavy influence? As she entered the cafe, her unease diluted into a focus that sharpened her perception. Glancing around, she instantly spotted Thomas, her old friend and former art school peer, sitting at a corner table. He appeared somber as he gestured her over, and the shadow that crossed his face caused her heart to lurch. What news could pull this thoughtful gentleman from his typically light-hearted demeanor? "Hey, Maria." His voice, though warm, was laden with urgency. The air between them thickened as she sat down. "I'm really glad you're here. I've been thinking a lot about our time in school and how we both struggled." She nodded, holding her breath as the weight of nostalgia and anxiety settled on her shoulders. "Things have changed so much since then," he continued. "But you're one of the few who hasn't lost that spark. You're still creating." His compliment was like a lift, momentarily dissolving the tension that gripped her. "Thank you, but I've been grappling with my direction," she admitted, her hands instinctively fidgeting with the edge of the table, resisting the urge to measure up her accomplishments against an invisible scale that had haunted her for years. Thomas leaned in closer, his voice barely above a whisper. "That's actually what I wanted to discuss. I've been working on an emerging artists initiative, and I think your work would resonate. We've secured a gallery for a showcase." Excitement and fear ignited within her, an opportunity to step into a spotlight she had long shied away from. But then the self-doubt surged back, echoing relentlessly in her mind. Had she come far enough? Was her art truly ready to be shared on such a platform? "What if my pieces aren't good enough?" she blurted, her insides twisting. The fear of judgment resurfaced, each unspoken critique sprouting into her consciousness like weeds. "Trust me, Maria," he urged. "You're an artist. You must show them the growth you've experienced. It's not about being perfect. It's about being honest." His words settled like a balm over her swirling thoughts. Perhaps this was the chance to further define her identity, an added layer to the canvas of her life that she was continually constructing. But there was also a daunting truth. This was no mere showcase. It was an invocation to confront her deepest fears and unveil herself with authenticity. As the weight of the decision settled in, Maria realized she was at a crossroads. Would she step into this realm of vulnerability and opportunity, or retreat into the familiar corners of doubt? Her heart raced with anticipation, trapping her between desire and a deep-seated fear of exposure. "The time has come to face the fears that have held you captive," she internally warned herself. The moment lingered heavy with potential, both tantalizing and terrifying. And so, as she braced for the choice that could shape her artistic journey, the question loomed larger than ever. Was she ready to confront her art, not just as a reflection of herself, but as a declaration of her very existence? Maria took a deep breath, the direction of her future hanging in the air, as she prepared to answer that pivotal call. Maria's thoughts swirled in a maelstrom of insecurity and determination as she sat across from Thomas. Each word he spoke felt like a call to arms, urging her to dig deeper within herself. A gallery showcase. Her heart danced with the idea, but her mind was a deluge of what-ifs. What if her art failed to resonate as it once had? What if she exposed herself only to find that her fears had roots deeper than she had imagined? Taking a steadying breath, she met Thomas's expectant gaze. It struck her how far they'd both strived since their days in art school, each navigating the tumultuous waves of self-doubt and ambition. "You believe in my work that much? After everything?" she asked softly, her voice thick with uncertainty. "I do," he replied, his conviction palpable. "You've always had a unique voice. People need to hear it." Did she? Maria's fingers traced the rim of her coffee cup, drawing both comfort and dread from its warmth. Thomas's words echoed in her mind, and she sifted through memories of her past attempts, critiques that haunted her still, the unsold canvases that lined the shadows of her studio. Yet she also recalled moments when she had painted without hesitation, lost in the vibrancy of creation. What had changed? Life had taught her to wear a mask, one that often held her true self at bay. "It's been so long since I allowed myself to be vulnerable with my art," she admitted, the truth leaving a raw ache in her chest. "What if I've forgotten how?" "Then remember," he encouraged, leaning in as if to shield her from the doubts swirling around them. "Dive into that place of fear, and let it guide you back to the joy of creation. Trust that the artist within you is waiting to emerge, even if it's messy." His gentle push struck a chord deep within. Assured that her fears were universal, even among artists who painted their souls on canvas, she felt a spark of resolve igniting beneath her doubt. Could she redefine her relationship with her art? Could this opportunity force her to transcend the limitations she had imposed on herself? "I'll do it," Maria declared suddenly, her voice stronger than she anticipated. "I'll share my work. I might be terrified, but it's time to challenge these fears." The words sent a thrill through her, electrifying her senses. The decision had been made, and with it came a commitment to venture beyond the protective cocoon she had woven around herself. Getting home later that evening, her mind buzzed with excitement. She opened her studio door, and the comforting chaos of brushes and paints beckoned her. This was her safe haven, yet also the theater of her greatest ghost, self-doubt. As she approached her unfinished canvas, she realized it embodied her contradiction. It was a delicate balance of color and shadow, a stark representation of her journey thus far. With renewed vigor, Maria picked up her brush and began to paint. Every stroke became a declaration. She acknowledged her fears while making space for her ambitions. The blending of colors mirrored her emotions, raw, exposed yet beautiful in its imperfection. Each layer she added was a step toward reclaiming her voice, a way to infuse her art with the honesty Thomas had urged her to show. Hours melted away as she poured into the canvas, and with each touch, she peeled away layers of her past, unwilling to let them constrain her future. The surrounding world faded, enveloped in the meditative trance of creation. It felt like breathing new life into a dormant part of herself. But doubts remained, lurking just behind the bold strokes of her paint. What if, when it came time to unveil her work, the world didn't see the same brilliance she felt? As the thought tugged at her resolve, she understood. This journey was about more than the end product. It was an exploration of her newfound courage. With the gallery opening date looming, she felt an urgent need to connect with her past, the lessons it had imparted, and the growth that had transpired since. Wrapped up in reflection, Maria also understood that the path she was on would be riddled with challenges, the kind that would demand all her courage and ingenuity. The next milestone staked its claim in her mind, the anticipation of the upcoming showcase, a platform to not only exhibit her art, but to confront her identity. Was she truly ready to stand in the light? As she contemplated the days ahead, her heart raced with fierce determination, tempered by the inevitable realities of self-discovery. As she embraced the vibrant chaos in her studio, she felt both empowered and terrified. This was more than an art show. It was an unveiling of herself to the world. But there remained one final question looming in her mind. Who would she become once she embraced her truth and stepped onto that stage? Maria awoke the next morning with an innate sense of urgency. The sun filtered through her studio window, illuminating the canvas that had consumed her thoughts through the night. Each stroke she had made was now burned in her memory, whispering promises of transformation. Today was about more than paint. It was about unveiling herself not just to an audience but to Maria as she wished to be, inspired, fearless, and true. As she prepared her morning coffee, each sip charged her with resolve. She recalled Thomas's faith in her, the way he had urged her to embrace her fears. It felt both empowering and daunting. The showcase was no longer a distant event, but a looming reality. She could feel the gravity of that date demanding her attention like an artist calling forth their muse. After a mindful breakfast, Maria returned to her studio and stood before her canvas. It was a mess of colors, vibrant swaths dancing around each other, each one telling a story of struggle and beauty. Today she would unveil it to herself fully. No hiding behind mere technique or aesthetic. It demanded more. It required her vulnerability. As the day wore on, She plunged into her work with newfound fervor. She mixed paints, layering rich pigments in a way that reflected her inner thoughts. Every brushstroke resonated with a part of her that had long been silenced by doubt. Colors bled into one another, representing her fears and aspirations intertwining in chaotic harmony. It was cathartic and terrifying, an act of rebellion against her past self. Yet as she painted, the specter of self-doubt loomed. What if this work didn't convey what she intended? What if it fell flat, just like so many canvases before? Determined, she silenced that inner critic, focusing instead on the act of creation, on what it felt like to channel her most authentic feelings into this piece. This was a milestone, a metamorphosis she had yearned for. As evening approached, her canvas was nearing completion. She stepped back, uncharacteristically hesitant. The colors whispered their stories, yet the unfinished edges screamed of uncertainty. Did it reflect her essence? In that moment of self-doubt, her mind flickered back to art school, a specific memory of a harsh critique from a visiting artist. His words, harsh but honest, had cut deep years ago. Art is not just skill, it's the soul laid bare for all to see. Maria grimaced at the recollection and was confronted with a pressing moral dilemma. How could she expose her vulnerabilities and remain true to herself without facing ridicule again? This showcase wasn't merely about displaying her art. It was a mirror reflecting her truest self. The notion gnawed at her, forcing her to confront the part of her that craved acceptance yet dreaded judgment. In that moment of stillness, inspiration surged. What if she could use the fear? Allow it to be a brush as well, painting her narrative in real time. She picked up the brush again, now with a clearer intention, each stroke purposeful, acknowledging her fear while flaunting her journey. As she lost herself in the rhythm of artistry, a new realization gripped her. The uncertainty was part of the adventure, a necessary companion on her road to authenticity. The exploration freed her, and she allowed herself to be raw. By the time night fell, Maria could hardly believe what lay before her. The art piece looked more alive than she had ever envisioned, but deep down, a whisper remained. What if it still wasn't enough? She felt both excitement and trepidation at sharing it with the world. The gallery showcase was not just an exhibition, it was the definitive test of her growth, a vulnerable confrontation with who she was now versus who she used to be. As fatigue seeped into her bones, she took one last look at her piece, feeling the pulse of her work reverberating in her chest. She had poured her heart into it, but was her heart enough? The very essence of her journey felt both light and heavy. She felt she had triumphed while also clinging to insecurities. With the showcase just days away, she faced a crucial realization. She could either succumb to fear or step into her truth, embracing whatever outcome might come. The challenge ahead sparked a nerve-wracking thrill. From this moment on, every choice would define her not just as an artist, but as a woman ready to step into her destiny. In that shared moment with her canvas, she now realized the stakes had risen. She wasn't just presenting art, she was unveiling her metamorphosis. As she closed the door on her studio for the night, one question blasted through her consciousness. What if, in showing her true self, she unlocked a new part of her identity that had remained dormant for far too long? Maria awoke the next morning with a renewed sense of purpose. The canvas lay before her, a pulsing testament to her evolution over the past few days. She felt a strange combination of anticipation and anxiety, each emotion coursing through her like the vibrant colors on her palette. Today was not just about refining her art, it was a continuation of her introspective journey, one that demanded honesty and courage. As she prepared breakfast, her mind raced with thoughts of her impending showcase. The fear that had previously paralyzed her now became a fuel for productivity. "I can't hide," she whispered to herself, savoring each bite with an invigorated appetite. "I must show every inch of who I am." Stepping into her studio felt different today. A sacred space where uncertainty had once ruled, now transformed into a sanctuary brimming with potential. Yet that same uncertainty loomed, casting shadows over her confidence. This was the paradox she now faced. The same fear that tormented her had also birthed a fierce determination. She positioned herself in front of the canvas and took a deep breath. "Today, I will paint my truth," she declared. Thoughts raced wildly as she envisioned each stroke representing not only her artistic skills, but also her growth. The fears from her past, the criticisms and judgments were no longer the chains holding her back. They had morphed into her brushes, ready to articulate a new narrative. But a shift in her resolve emerged when a nagging thought interjected. What if others didn't see or appreciate her vulnerability? What if they looked past the layers she had woven into her piece and only saw the colors they expected? Each brushstroke now felt like a gamble, the potential for ridicule lurking behind her determination. The internal dialogue became intense. She had a moment of reckoning, weighing her aspirations against her lingering insecurities. What if she failed? What if she succeeded? Each question was a double-edged sword, cutting both ways, binding her to the fear she yearned to transcend. She closed her eyes, sought a moment of calm, and forced herself to confront what lay beneath that fear. A core of resilience yearning to break free. With steady breaths, she dove into the canvas with renewed vigor. The colors she applied were filled with meaning, each marking tangible evidence of her emotional struggles. The bold strokes mirrored her growing conviction, while softer hues illustrated the lingering remnants of self-doubt. It was a chaotic symphony of her psyche, woven together into a harmonized existence. Hours melted away as Maria poured herself entirely into the piece, and the once intimidating specter of vulnerability became a blanket of liberation. She felt each stroke feed her evolution, intertwining her identity as an artist with her essential self. As she stepped back to evaluate her work, a realization struck her like lightning. The journey of embracing her vulnerabilities had unearthed strengths previously shrouded in fear. She could see it now. Each flaw, each lack of polish contributed to the raw authenticity of her creation. This was no longer just an exhibition of abstract emotions. It was a revelation, a testament to her perseverance and growth. Amidst the unwinding of her creative process, a new question emerged, one that required urgent self-examination. Was she ready to share this masterpiece? Could she summon the courage to stand before an audience and unveil not just her artwork, but a slice of her very soul? The responsibility of authenticity weighed heavier than the paint on her palette. The thought coursed through her, igniting an emboldened spirit. She realized that true strength lies not in the absence of fear, but in the ability to walk through it. The showcase would be the stage upon which she would present more than art. It would be a platform that screamed, "This is me and I am enough." As night crept upon her, exhaustion enveloped her like a cozy blanket. Yet she felt exhilarated, almost electrified by her labor. The canvas couldn't simply display her fears. It was a tribute to her triumph, a mark of her transformation. With the showcase breathing down her neck, her heart raced at the possibilities ahead. Would she claim the identity she'd crafted? A fearless artist unafraid to expose her vulnerabilities? Was she truly ready to step into the light of her newfound self? The question lingered, igniting a flicker of determination as she embraced the last decision of the night. She would commit, not just to the canvas, but to her unfolding destiny. The journey was far from over. Each moment ahead was a canvas yet to be filled. And as she closed her studio door, one lingering thought danced through her mind. Was she prepared for the challenge of an audience? Maria stood at the entrance of the gallery, her heart pounding with the weight of anticipation and self-doubt. This was the culmination of her journey, a showcase where her art would finally be exposed to the world. The vibrant colors of her painting lingered in her mind, still fresh with the emotion she had poured into every brushstroke. But today, as she adjusted her dress and smoothed her palms against its fabric, the fear crept back in, whispering doubts about whether her art was enough. The gallery buzzed with excitement. Voices filled the air. Laughter mingled with applause, and the mingling scents of paint and polished wood tantalized her senses. The walls displayed her work, each piece representing a fragment of her soul. Yet, even as admirers admired her artwork, Maria wrestled internally with the need for validation. Was it solely a fear of judgment that trapped her, or was this an opportunity to finally embrace her identity as an artist without apology? As the crowd continued to gather, she felt the pull of their gazes, mixing her initial thrill with anxiety. But then she remembered Mrs. Anderson's encouraging words, echoing in her mind. Embrace your journey. Maria inhaled deeply, finding solace in the notion that art was not about perfection but honesty. The uncomfortable vulnerability had begun to weave itself into the fabric of her identity. She took a step forward, ready to interact with the audience. Thomas caught her eye, his smile unwavering, a beacon of solidarity. Their connection reminded her of everything that had led her here, the long nights spent painting, the nurturing guidance of mentors, and the unwavering love for her mother. Maria, someone called from the corner, a familiar face from her past igniting warmth in her stomach. It was one of her old art school friends. You've outdone yourself. Their excitement wrapped around Maria like a comfort blanket. Suddenly, the swirling doubts dissipated. Fueled by the atmosphere of celebration and encouragement, she began to engage with each person who approached her work, sharing the stories behind her paintings. With every compliment, her confidence grew, transforming that initial fear into burgeoning pride. She was no longer just a maid who created art, but an artist worthy of respect and recognition. As the night unfolded, she noticed something remarkable. Her paintings sparked conversations, igniting passions and discussions among attendees, many of whom came to share their interpretations of her work. This interaction pushed Maria beyond the threshold of self-doubt. Her art served as a bridge, connecting hearts and minds who found meaning in her expression. At that moment, Maria fully realized the power of her journey. Each stroke had not only reflected her internal struggles and triumphs, but now resonated with others, creating a collective energy that spread across the room. She felt liberated, her initial need for validation shifting into gratitude for the shared human experience her art inspired. As the evening progressed, she was approached by a local art critic, a figure whose presence commanded attention. Maria, he began, admiration in his eyes. Your work is compelling. I'd love to feature you in our next issue. The words were a validation that Maria had long craved, but this time they resonated differently. Instead of merely appeasing her insecurities, they built upon the foundation of self-worth she had cultivated over these past years. Maria smiled, realizing that recognition was no longer the ultimate measure of her worth. This was proof of her transformation. The validation she sought was a byproduct of her willingness to embrace her art and herself authentically. The night was not just an ending, but a beginning. Her identity as an artist firmly established, not just in the critique of others, but in the joyful acknowledgement of her own journey. When she arrived home, the night's echoes faded, but the warmth within her thrived. With her mother happily nestled in bed, Maria felt a wellspring of accomplishment course through her veins. She sat in her studio, her heart swelling with pride. The woman staring back at her in the mirror was no longer merely a maid. She was Maria, the artist who had conquered self-doubt and transformed her life through the vibrancy of her art. Taking a moment to reflect, she whispered a promise to herself. This was merely the beginning of a lifelong journey, embracing her truth and her journey as both an artist and a woman. She had achieved clarity, conquered insecurity, and boldly showed the world her authentic self. This newfound confidence opened the door to the next chapter of her life, one where she would continue to create without the weight of fear. Inspired, she picked up her brush yet again, realizing there were countless more stories waiting to be told on canvas. With every paint stroke, she continued to transform lives, starting with her own. Now is the time to be a part of Maria's journey. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. You need to subscribe now, because this is the moment to show your support for real-life transformation stories. Don't wait even one more second to share. True fans understand the importance of supporting this channel through these powerful actions.